Hey guys, this is Mauro. Welcome to this ZBrush environment tutorial. We're going to be going over some 2D, 3D environment painting techniques, starting with this massive black workshop demo that I did, sort of a live action take on the old Pat Labor anime by Mauro Oshii. So this is kind of the set I built for that demo, and just kind of going back in there and using these parts to build a much bigger scene, since it's already kind of built, and just experimenting and exploring things. Just a lot of stuff that don't usually get to do on bigger jobs where time is where time is of the essence. So it's good just to do some personal work sometimes and explore and have fun and screw up and not worry too much about a sort of rigid time frame. So right now I'm just going through there and manipulating and editing pieces and changing things. And because the initial demo I did at the Massive Black Workshop was just kind of trying to take what was in the show and doing a more realistic take on it. So a lot of the like face elements and things are a pretty literal version of what was in the show, which is still cool, but it was definitely a bit simplified to be able to be animated and stuff. So just trying to update things and maybe try a more realistic take on some of these elements, which I'll be going through a bit more later on in the video. So just going in and using the Damon sander to cut in some forms and get a more aggressive looking face. So yeah, there wasn't really a big plan for this sort of shot that I want to do. Hopefully you had a little peek at the beginning of the end result, which I think turned out pretty interesting. But hopefully, if you guys haven't worked in 3D before, hopefully you can see the benefits. Like, I built this environment for the previous demo, but I have all these assets now, and I can easily build this giant hangar scene pretty quickly. And just zoom around and move around all this stuff to create a quite detailed, expansive environment pretty easily. So right now, just taking all these catwalk elements and duplicating and moving them around, and hopefully you can see, like, I have this mech and I have this basic catwalk elements, but I can just flesh out this environment pretty quickly. And hopefully you can see the benefits of 3D by the end of this. It's a bit different than 2D. I was trained as a industrial designer and illustrator, so where the payoff is, almost immediate, of just, you put down some marks on a paper and you see the final result getting created. But with 3D, it's a bit of a delayed gratification where, you're building all these gray cubes for hours, and then, but the end result going into Keyshot, in Photoshop, you can just get a very nearly photographic representation of your design, but you don't really see it. You kind of have to keep it in your mind what the end result is going to be, but once you see it, it's I feel worth the time and delay and gratification. So right now I just have a lot of pieces in this environment that are kind of merged together, and I'm just going through and decimating them down and isolating out the elements I want to duplicate. So some of these catwalks and things have chords and a lot of things that I don't really want attached to them, so I'm just going in and splitting masked points or unmasked points, or splitting to parts in the geometry subpalette. And also, I'm working mainly on a laptop, so you'll see me go in and use the decimation master quite often just to keep the poly count down, and so things don't chug too bad when I'm moving around the scene. So just duplicating those walls and trying to build the general space that I want for this shot. Again, I don't really have a vague idea of what I want. I kind of want this sort of hangar space with these mechs. Maybe it was like the program for these pilots was shut down, and it's this one. Sometimes Decimation Master can take some time, so some adventure friends helped us out with that one. But I was just thinking it's some sort of the program was shut down for some reason, and now some cataclysmic event or some big event happened, and it's getting turned back on, and this lone pilot comes in, and it's kind of the moment he sees the mech and is about to get back in and restart this this sort of new era of these robots coming back into the world. So I thought that could be a kind of cool moment, and just trying to flesh out the that overall space right now. But again, just exploring and having fun. Even though that's the shot I wanted, that's not what I end up doing, which again we'll get to in a bit. But yeah, you can see how quickly I can just flesh out this space with 8 mechs or something, and get this massive, this really good understructure for some future paintings. But again, even though I wanted to do a particular shot, you can see how easily I can just make dozens of other shots of this same environment. And again, it's really handy for film or game production. Say if there's like a scene that takes place in this environment, and the director initially wanted a certain shot or wants multiple shots in the same scene, you can easily do that by just moving the camera around. And so right now you see I just went into the light box to get that base human and just inserting it into the environment, just to get some scale. Now that all my pieces are there, I want to see human scale in that environment as quickly as possible. Like, I have this person in there, and there's railings. It has to be a certain height. The details on the mech have to be a certain intensity of detail depending on how big a human is in this space. So I think as early as possible, try to get human scale, if it's a environment where humans are and not aliens or whatever, but just get some sort of scale that we are familiar with, so that all your other details follow suit. Like if my human scale in this was a bit bigger, I'd have to manipulate all the railings so that, when he moves his hand out about waist height, there's going to be a railing that he can grab onto, and it's not too thick and not too thin, and all that good stuff. So again, just right now, just playing, like you start to instantly, sort of everything instantly comes into context once you add that human scale in the environment. Just trying to manipulate some of these older elements to isolate out a railing, so I can duplicate that railing all over and start to flesh out the environment. And hopefully you see, like, personally I was a bit hesitant to jump into 3D, but after a while you start to see it just sort of exponentially speeds up your workflow. Like maybe the first sort of round of work or whatever is a bit slower than just drawing out an idea, but once you have that first design or idea out, you're building on something each time, so it exponentially just speeds up. So here, even though I initially wanted that sort of shot of the guy looking up at the robot, I was thinking of other possible shots later on, and maybe there's some general and his assistant on the catwalk overlooking these huge row of mechs. Just you don't really see a lot of that stuff in films anymore, so it'd be cool. Just thinking of all the cool things I love from the 80s, like all these cool, the Pat LaBelle animes and things that all this stuff's inspired by. Just trying to do something like that captures that feeling I had watching all those old animes growing up. So just adjusting things and moving things around, and just kind of want these sort of column elements holding the robots in place, and just trying to get a feel for how close I want them together. And I think things were slowing down a bit, so I'm just kind of going through and continuing to decimate all these bigger, dense pieces so I can refine the design a bit. So I'm kind of wanting to refine that face a bit more, and I just went into a insert multi-mesh brush and trying to add some different parts and things, and using Dynamesh to combine all those together, and maybe getting something like that to work. Ultimately, I don't think that shape's working so well. Just feels like I've seen that in so many animes and other things, just this kind of wedge face. Just feel like it's been done to death. I don't know if it's like Evangelion or Zone of the Enders, or just dozens of other kind of animes have this wedge face sort of thing. So end up changing it later, but again, it's just me exploring, having fun. I think it was worth going down this path just to know that wasn't the final direction I wanted to go. But I think something more boxy and utilitarian is much more fitting for this type of world. But just still going down and detailing things. You can see I'm just going through and masking things off and using the layer brushes to get some sort of milled aluminum looking forms in there, which you can find on like superbike chassis or car chassis or anything that's kind of an exposed underframe of a mechanical vehicle. You just see these details everywhere. Which usually have like a lighter carbon fiber or plastic or lighter metal, more aerodynamic form bolted or attached on top to give you the sort of design you see on the surface. So again, I'm not really feeling like this is working, but I'm going to continue to explore it and add in some secondary cut lines and structural lines, and see what comes out of that. Again, this is just for me, just having fun exploring. It's not some process I use every single time. I think it's good to, especially on personal work, to just experiment and explore and screw up, and not have to worry about deadlines or clients or any of that stuff. So a lot of this sort of playtime for yourself is where you come up with new techniques and just push yourself and learn new stuff, which again you can apply back to your paying work. But I think it's super important to make this time for yourself to just keep yourself creatively satisfied. It's easy to get a little burnt out only working on other people's stuff or films or games or whatever, where someone else has the final say. But it's nice to just to have fun and work on something you think is cool, and learn some new techniques and experiment. So yeah, highly recommend just giving yourself this time every week or month or whatever it takes to keep you excited about what you do. And again, you can see here I'm not like a super high poly cinematic modeler guy like some of my friends, but for me, I just kind of get things like far enough along to the point where I can do a detailed paint over in Photoshop, because I just know the things I'm fast at. Sorry, you can see here I'm diving into a file with just a bunch of like kitbash parts. These particular ones were purchased from Vitaly Bulgarov, which you can buy from his website, and just have a lot of really nice kind of secondary details and optics and things that can be easily manipulated and kitbash together to get sort of some nice secondary details on your designs. And there's a lot of other sites like Bad King and all these other people that offer sort of kitbash parts and things in the community. But you can see I'm trying to, there's some boxy form in there. I think it's like an optics turned backwards, but just doesn't feel right. So I think I take that out of there. But again, just experimenting, exploring, seeing what comes out of it. Like, maybe it doesn't work, maybe it works, maybe it leads to something else. But it's worth exploring in the creative process to see what comes out of it. But back to the other point, yeah, I'm not like super high poly modeler guy, but so I would consider all my models and stuff to be like concept level, not like finished level, ready to go into a film or something. But it's just knowing your strengths. Like, I can't come from a 2D background, so I'm definitely still faster at that sort of stuff. So I know that I can get this sort of base form and maybe block it out to a pretty detailed level still, but I know what details I can create in Photoshop, and me using a photo in like 2 minutes is much faster than me building 10 pieces in ZBrush just so it's accurate on the model. But again, that's the payoff in 3D as opposed to 2D. I could go that level, and the final rendering in Keyshot or whatever would be even better because I modeled every single piece. So that's definitely something I'm always fighting with, like, how far do I take this in 3D? Because on a job, again, time is always money. So usually I end up defaulting back to what I'm fastest at. But I think eventually I'll get to somewhere pretty far along with building things in 3D to a pretty high level. But for now, it's still 2D, 3D hybrid is still fastest for me. So, and again, if you guys haven't dived in, hopefully it gives you a good idea or hopefully it excites you enough to pick up ZBrush and try this out for yourself, and just see all the benefits of working with both programs. I don't think it necessarily takes anything away from doing everything in 2D alone. It's just techniques you can use to speed up your workflow and help you out later on. And so still messing around with that face, using the clip brushes to try to cut in some more angular forms. And a little while ago I was trying to block that out and make it more a bit more wedge face, which I end up doing later, but just trying to see if that would work on that sort of overall design. Again, hopping back into that kitbash file for some pistons and things. I was thinking on the neck, maybe it could be all right to have a couple pistons, which I think I end up keeping, but I end up playing around with it in the shoulders and things. But again, it kind of clashes with the overall design aesthetic of most of this is covered up. So I wanted to, didn't want to break that sort of art direction. So yeah, thinking about these exposed pistons on the shoulders, maybe like more like a hexapod sort of setup that you see in the show as well. But again, when you see it in the show, it's in an earlier test phase, so it's all exposed and stuff. So right now, all that stuff is underneath this cloth and armor and stuff. So again, it just clashes with the art direction. So I just end up taking that out. And right here, you'll see I accidentally clicked the on-off button, which unfortunately I have a lot of other parts that I'm not using and didn't delete. So when I turned it back on, it unhid all the parts. So I have to go back in, and I'm just hiding all these other pieces that accidentally got turned back on. So just something to be aware of. So getting those pistons turned back off again, and so going back in and just adding some more of those kind of structural lines and things on the, there's a couple kind of really blank areas. I'm just trying to think of what I can use to fill in those spaces. Maybe some kitbash parts to help with that. But I think ultimately just drawing in a few lines in there and doing the rest in Photoshop will be the most efficient for me right now. So again, I still thinking some part might be good for this face, like maybe some chunky, blocky face from some kitbash piece. But ultimately, I go in and do a custom thing, which is probably always the best for like some key feature. Just do it yourself. So right now, I'm just opening up a new scene, loading in the current face we have, and just gonna build on top of that something new. So we kind of have this wedge face that, again, feels too aerodynamic or too advanced for the type of world that's creating. So just starting with inserting a cube in there and turning Dynamesh on to easily start cutting into that, and just, doing some pretty simple hard surface techniques with the clipping brushes, and just getting those kind of chunky, faceted looking forms in there, and using the masking and transpose tools to get some pretty utilitarian looking forms in there. Right now I'm just building a simple frame structure with a cube. So going in there and dragging out little frame parts and using Dynamesh to retopologize everything. And you can easily just, I know there's other ways to do this, but I found this was a pretty easy way to create these kind of chassis looking forms in ZBrush. And actually learned how to do all that by just watching Vitaly's kind of sloth modeling demo. He's using XSI, but I kind of just, the way he was working was really interesting to me. I haven't really seen someone work like that before, so I just tried to re-engineer that stuff in ZBrush and figure out how to do all that stuff in the program. So that was one of the solutions I came up with. So hopefully that's pretty handy for creating these kind of chassis forms. And then just going in with the clay buildup to bring in some more of these structural lines. Again, it's not super clean, but that's not my goal with a lot of this. It's just get it close enough, and I can detail that in Photoshop. So just kind of, again, getting this kind of blocky, chunky face. Maybe it has a sort of screen in there on the front where some optics or something can be behind with like a bulletproof glass or something, and maybe some additional cylindrical optics in the mouth, quote unquote mouth area, but where a mouth would be if this was a face. Sort of some of the stuff you see on like these some modern tanks. So again, I don't really have a clear idea other than this kind of chunky, boxy, utilitarian look, but I go through a few different versions that would all equally be just as interesting. Like maybe it has this weird back visor and this kind of weird form that pops out the front, but ultimately I go for something, yeah, I'm just thinking of maybe it's like these 2 or 3 interlocking forms, which could be pretty interesting. And maybe those like chassis forms stick out the sides like kind of barbs or something, or possibly some antenna or something. But I think this direction it just started getting too anthropomorphic and just didn't feel as badass as you want to say it. But yeah, it started looking like too much like a face or an expression of someone. So I just kind of go back to a singular sort of chunky piece, but now it just looks more like looking closer to what I'm after. So again, inserting a cylinder and getting that kind of cylindrical optic, that kind of like two. Again, you see this on tanks and things where it's like these multiple different cylindrical forms. Like one looks up and down, which is in the mouth area, and then the one below that goes side to side. So kind of these two. Thought it would be kind of creepy to have these two optics, kind of one looking side to side and the other one looking up and down, and just thinking about how it would be animated, and something that would be kind of interesting if it was in a game or a movie or something. Like the whole thing's static, but these two little things are just like looking back and forth and stuff. Could be pretty fun. Just wanting to add more structural lines and beams and things. Like, so I'm thinking this top part could be some sort of visor made of like a black glass or something, like a really strong material, and then there's these secondary kind of forms coming out that clip into it or grasp onto it for added support. So just going in and masking those off and just stretching them out. Just more structural lines and making it feel as logical as possible. I think we're getting pretty close to what I'm after. Again, just trying to make as many like support details and structures to keep all this feeling consistent. More structural lines with the clay buildup. And again, you'll see that like a lot of this just comes from studying military vehicles and tanks and looking at how they're constructed. And you'll see like if there's two sort of pieces of steel, there'll be like weld marks or a little bit of buildup of material where something connects. Just depends on the construction method, and just think it looks kind of cool, so I'm just adding it in there. Thinking about maybe some additional in-cuts and things, like maybe some vents or something, which could have been cool. I think in hindsight, I think that might have been a better sort of design detail on the face, but ultimately I just go for simplicity. Maybe some extra chassis form coming out the front, like some cage kind of forms, which you'll see on like a lot of Boston Dynamics stuff. So again, and if I was to go in and detail this, like I'm doing a little bit of detail in the back, which we never see, but just having fun and going for it. But in hindsight, I probably would detail, after seeing how much I didn't get in the rendering when we get into the painting portion of this, probably would have been better to detail some additional parts on the cylindrical areas on the side. It just felt a little too simple, and again, I kind of started to keep a certain aesthetic in the face and these kind of all these structural lines. So I kind of wish I would have detailed the kind of side of the ear areas a bit more. But so again, it's getting probably like detailed enough for what we need, just last minute tweaks and changes, maybe some other secondary forms. Still kind of feels a bit like poofy on the sides. It's one of my pet peeves, is this kind of earmuff syndrome on a lot of tech designs, where it just feels like someone has Princess Leia earmuffs or something. But I think from the angle I paint it, you don't really see it, but yeah, that always bugs me. So I think I'm pretty happy with that. So I go into just go to merge visible, and then select that model, and then go into my other scene, and just insert that into the bigger scene, and then change all the faces on the current robots. And yeah, that looks much more fitting for what we're doing. So then just going and duplicating that and replacing all the current heads. I was wanting to go back in and detail that chest a bit more, but the decimation master, or I had decimated it down, so I just had to redynamesh that and add in a few more little structural lines, then decimate it again. So now I've brought this into KeyShot, and I'm just going to be adding some simple materials and messing around with the camera lens and angles to get the exact shots I want as a base. And still, this is very exploratory. This isn't exactly the shot I want. I'm just trying to find the overall shot and possible other shots I can use later on in the future. But I wanted to note that before you go into KeyShot, you'll want to decimate your entire scene down pretty far, because if the model is over about like 400 or 500 megabytes, it just won't open, or it'll crash or something. I think this might be a result of me working on a laptop. I'm not sure if other guys who are on a tower, if this happens to you as well, but for me, I have to keep it around that 400 or 500 megabyte limit, or it just doesn't work. Or I'll be sitting there for 10 hours and it'll finally open, or something along those lines. So just keep the model and geo down as far as possible to avoid any complications or slowdown when you get into KeyShot. But you can see I'm just using the standard kind of studio lighting, just a kind of nice ambient occlusion looking lighting on everything. Going into the camera menu and adjusting the perspective, and just kind of seeing what I can get. It's interesting to see like the difference between keeping the perspective and lens really flat and going in and adjusting the perspective quite dynamic, where I have the same shot, but now instead of it being very flat, and it's like looking at the guy and the scene and all the architecture and stuff, and adjusting the perspective, and it looks like the camera just flies right in, and I'm sitting right next to the guy over his shoulder looking at this robot with him. Just makes it much more of an intimate shot. And it's just, again, it's just me experimenting and exploring. I'm not trying to, not some process I use every single time that I've got down. It's just me experimenting and see what comes out of this kind of hangar space. And you can see some of the renders I'm getting out now, and most of them are totally viable for a paint over or something, but just for me, just wanting to see what else I can get out of this with different materials or different shots and lighting. And but generally, I think the base gray gives us enough information for a paint over. But for the final, I do go in and add in different colors and materials, so the paint over goes a bit more smooth. But as I was mentioning earlier, you can just zoom to a high angle shot, a low angle shot, make it really flat or dynamic, or just a lot of different options to explore in KeyShot that ZBrush doesn't really have at the moment. It's quite a handy tool and gives you a very photographic looking renders. It's definitely a program to pick up if you haven't already. So just going through a lot of the renders I went through to explore what I wanted to, what the final shot would be for this scene. And so after this point, I went back and asked for some help from friends and got some advice, and did some sketches of more interesting shots. So I went back into 3D and modified a few things in the existing scene to build a much smaller, more intimate scene and shot. So I was thinking it'd be more interesting, instead of this guy on a catwalk walking towards this, I thought it'd be pretty cool if it was more of maybe a team of soldiers coming in, and one guy has kind of opened up the mech and is kind of hacking into it or something, and there's a soldier in the extreme foreground kind of keeping watch, and maybe there's a couple other guys on this catwalk near the mech all kind of standing guard and making sure this operation goes smoothly. So I'm just adjusting the perspective a bit to get a sense for what this shot could look like, and I believe I go for a more dynamic perspective on this. But you can see just something in the extreme foreground just adds a bit more sense of story, kind of as opposed to something more static. A lot of the stuff I'm applying here is from was recently watching James Paick's CDW tutorial, and a lot of the painting stuff he goes over I apply in there. So if you need to brush up on some foundation painting stuff, I think that's a good one to watch. Just been a few years since I painted stuff from just went in and painted things, so it's been a fun exercise doing this to get back up to speed. So right now I'm just going in and dropping multiple materials, so I know generally the materials I want. So in ZBrush beforehand, I made sure to the other mechs I decimated down, but this one I made sure to go in individually and keep all the parts separated with separate poly groups, so I could go in and apply different materials to each part. Ideally, you would plan in advance the materials and the colors and group all your 3D parts based on that, but sometimes it's a bit hard to tell what's going on. So a tweak I learned for that is just make sure they're all separated out as individual parts, and when you bring it into Keyshot, apply one material to the whole environment. So say the whole environment's generally this dark bluish material, and then just apply separately the different parts that are different materials. But you have to go to the menu in Keyshot and make sure to separate the materials out. So just getting all these layers isolated and chopping things out that I know are going to be in the foreground, etc. Starting to do some broad strokes of lighting. So kind of want it to be quite moodily lit, sort of some smoke and atmosphere in the air, sort of getting a general idea of what I want right now is a good way to work, usually just general to specific. But a lot of the gradient stuff I'm using now is, again, just after watching James Paick's environment painting tutorial, some really nice advice and comments about using gradients and how to create a really natural looking space with some very simple advice. So definitely recommend checking that out if you haven't already. So again, I didn't have this sort of soft cloth armor on the belly, but I can just quickly chop that up in Photoshop and put it in there. And then of course I need to separate out the catwalk and everything So again, just isolating different elements, these wires and ropes and things, just to make sure I have as much control as possible. It's a great base for us to paint over, but there's still a little bit of work isolating out some elements to separate things out. Just diving into some photo reference of some, like SWAT soldiers and things. Just getting some placeholder right now, which we'll modify and change later. So we'll get our soldier in the foreground, just get sort of a general pose of some guy holding a gun and chopping up multiple images to create what we need just to save some time. So maybe this is, so instead of some pilot coming in, maybe this is like some bad guy force in some future war. And there's a team of 4 guys coming in to get some data off of this robot. So just diving back into my earlier demo, there's a lot of design details and photo details that I got for that first painting. So I'm just recycling a bit of those details just to save a bit of time. So getting decals and things I used, all from just photos of UN tanks and all that sort of stuff. And again, just making sure all the layering is working. So I have a layer of like scratches and dust and things. So just making sure they are underneath the scratches so all that stuff shows up properly. So getting a sense for how all this will fit on there, graphic design elements. If you look at real vehicles, I recently went to this military show in Singapore, and seeing a Apache in real life is pretty awesome. And just seeing how much decals and things are all over that thing is pretty cool to see. Just seeing it in real life definitely sinks in more than just looking at a couple photos. Isolating out the windows a bit and just doing a Gaussian blur and putting on a lighten layer or a screen layer to get some more, like maybe the light's blooming a bit. I was thinking about maybe some God rays coming in from the sky, but I don't think that really works for this type of image. And the keyshot render was pretty good, but you can see I'm just going in there with the darken or multiply layer to get a bit more separation of the forms, and going in and drawing some cross beams on these this catwalk area to add more detail and interest. Also duplicated the layer and just offset it a little bit to get a bit more, make it feel a bit more, make it feel like it has a bit more form. And then just duplicated both those layers again to make the back cross beams on the far side of the catwalk. And just trying to use gradients and other techniques to make it feel like it's sitting on the far side of that catwalk. Just going in and making sure to separate out my value groups. And so say there's this kind of this more of a whitish light gray mech with these sort of dark flexible rubber or some flexible material on the moving parts and the shoulders and stuff. Just making sure to isolate out those elements and make sure it reads, the values read. Just trying to get the keyshot render, again, it's more of an ambient occlusion, and now that I'm lighting this, I want it to be a bit more of a harsh lighting in some areas, so getting a more harsh lighting on the top of that rail, I just using the line tool to get some of that stuff in there. Some more details on the catwalk. And again, just isolating things out so you don't have to do as much painting, making sure those wires are on a separate layer, and being able to put some photo details underneath so they overlap. getting some kind of tank plate details on the shoulders and other areas. I think I might have gone a bit overboard on the scratches and details, but I think I tone it down a bit later. This is definitely not my strongest suit. I definitely, since design school, I did environments occasionally, but and did environments on some movies like Elysium and stuff, but it's always been kind of like pulling teeth for me. So doing this was pretty fun to get back into it. It's been quite a bit of time since I did a proper environment painting. Yeah, for whatever reason, it always just feels like a painful experience or something. So it's good to attack the problem and get over your fears and stuff, and just hit the nail on the head, as you will. Not sure why though, but I guess I feel like isolated designs are much more manageable problems to solve, whereas I guess in my mind, environments, there's so many issues to handle, it's a bit overwhelming sometimes. But I think once I get into it, it's just you start to have fun and just play around with elements. So right now I was feeling like that right side of the space was a bit too empty, and the composition was getting a bit lopsided. So I copy over that column and start adding in some elements that again aren't in my environment. And that's why, again, I don't spend too much time in 3D, because so many things can come about in 2D that I never could have planned for. I could try to plan and build everything in 3D, but again, like that, I'll get the shot and be like, well, it'd be much more interesting if there's another column here. It'd be much more interesting if there's these interesting structural details in the foreground that I wouldn't have planned for, and I wouldn't have time to build, but I found some interesting photo or some interesting brush that I have to make this composition more balanced and visually pleasing. It's just hard to plan all that out in gray models, at least for me. So that's why I think it's very useful to go back and forth and bounce around and only use things for what they're best at, I guess, or at least for me as a designer, just using the best parts of each tool to get the job done. So blocking out some, again, same sort of thing, like it'd be more interesting if there's some junk or some boxes or something in between the foreground and the catwalk. So I'm just adding in secondary details and adding more clutter in there to bring more life to the scene. And again, pushing things back, like again, the ambient occlusion lighting was pretty general, but going in with a soft brush and getting using your kind of Viscom skills from just sort of back in school, and adding soft shadows and cast shadows and harsh shadows where there would be in this environment if the lighting scenario I have right now is actually happening. Just adding more clutter and pipes and hoses and all that good stuff. Trying to get that ceiling to feel more integrated, and again, just zooming back is quite good to get a sense for the environment and the big shapes, and making sure everything is reading and your eyes going where you want it to go. Just going to some more photos now and adding in some more secondary details, adding a bit more color and different lights. I think I might have taken a break there, on my computer ran out of space because it's a laptop, so I have trouble with space running out. But basically just used a couple other layers, added some more lights, trying to get a bit more camera and lighting effects, so making it feel like those lights are really blown out from the windows in the back, blocking in some additional soldiers, and again, just adding more life to the scene and more visual interest, and seeing if it works, experimenting. Adjusting colors, I think that feels a bit too desaturated or like a pinkish color. So just trying to just trying to make all that work. And also I'm thinking it'd be more interesting if there was additional lights behind the mech. It was just feeling a bit too flat. I know we built it right up against the wall, and again, going in 2D, there's a lot of things you can change. I wouldn't have planned this in 3D, but it's more interesting if this is like a foggy. So say if this was a set design, I would definitely fog the set. And if you just study a lot of cinematography and film lighting, they do this all the time. So thinking like a cinematographer right now, if this was a set and I was shooting this scene, I would definitely fog the set and maybe add some secondary lights behind the mech so his silhouette pops out even more. So right now I'm just adding sort of going with the soft brush and adding some kind of haze behind the mech and just cutting out all the areas where he is, or the mech is covering that up, just to get some, again, additional read to the silhouette. And again, also feeling like that the set was a bit too plain, like just too simple rectangles, so just adding in some junk and structural details in the foreground on the right. Just going back in with a kind of a chalk brush and painting in some details. Maybe there's some additional junk on the left side, and some of the window on the right is coming through on the left. And I'm kind of a sucker for those strong dark foreground elements. Some more boxes or something in the foreground for some more interest. Yeah, just making it feel like a cool movie set or a game or something. Like, I think that's how you know you're having fun. Like, I think at this point I finally started to get into things, and when in your mind you start asking yourself, like, wouldn't it be cool if this, or wouldn't it be more interesting if, when you start asking yourself these kind of questions, I feel like you're in the right frame of mind and you're just having fun and getting excited about what you're working on. And something that's sometimes a bit hard to do on client work sometimes, but not always. So here's some of those tank optics I was talking about that kind of rotate up and down and left and right. So just experimenting. Again, maybe some additional optics, or maybe you can see some of these inner workings underneath this dark glass. Ultimately, I scrap all that stuff, but again, it's just worth exploring and experimenting and having fun and seeing what comes out of it. And again, playing around with these kind of graphic breakups and details on the face, but again, something about it getting too anthropomorphic, it just doesn't work for me. So if it starts looking like a face or some guy giving a weird expression, it just doesn't seem cool to me anymore. So I just end up taking a lot of that out. So continuing to adjust the decals and scratches, and this is where it just kind of becomes a bit tedious, just going in there and like almost like fine-tune scrubbing a lot of details. I know a lot of my more Illustrator friends that love more painterly images probably wouldn't do things this way, but they'd probably step back and only add a detail that needs to be there. But for me, I think I get too into building things, so I probably go in there and detail things too much, more than I should, I guess. But again, it's just personal work and just having fun, so I don't think it's too big of a deal. Just going in there and calculating where the light would actually fall, and where the rim light would be, where objects would catch highlights based on their materials, and all that good foundation stuff I learned at Art Center. And if you don't have that background, like an ID background with perspective and matte surface shading type stuff. You can pick up a lot of that understanding from Scott Robertson's books and tutorials. He put out some great, most of my training, foundation training at Art Center, he put into DVDs, so go check out his perspective and matte surface shading DVDs especially are pretty invaluable if you're studying or been working for a while. It's always a good refresher course. Just foundation skills, it never gets old. So again, just kind of detailing out some of those kind of cylindrical elements on the chest. Wasn't really sure what they were in the model, but just trying to get back in there and paint those in. So just going into a lot of my photo reference and decal sets and just trying to help flesh out the scene. Trying to focus on these secondary soldiers, wanting them to be the same team. I think initially, after chatting with some of my peers, the initial idea was one soldier sort of kind of watching this scientist or worker working on this, but then I thought it would be a bit more interesting if it was more like a squad infiltrating this hangar and trying to steal data or upload some virus or something to this robot. So running with that, I'm just trying to make these 4 soldiers all feel a bit consistent. So just, photo bashing and painting and whatever gets the job done. So like in this case, the soldier is actually facing the wrong way, but the details are like, there's enough details in there and specular highlights that you don't really question it. You just look at these sort of abstract shapes of a human holding a gun, and your mind kind of fills in the gap, even though it's just a silhouette. So just painting in some vague indication of someone touching some sort of PDA or screen device that's being inserted into this mech's chest area, and drawing in the rim lighting and all the areas that this purple light will be illuminating, going in and indicating these different optics and turning these guys into a team, maybe some red band on their shoulder with a triangular insignia or something along those lines to tie them all together, even if we're not detailing them too much. Again, once they're blocked in, it becomes more about integrating them into the environment. So even though they're black color, it's just depending on how much mist and color and lighting is in the scene, just trying to make them feel like they sit in space. Again, back to that James Paick's tutorial, he talks a lot about this sort of stuff, which is just super handy. I mean, it's all real foundation stuff, but it's good to hear him say all that stuff and get a refresher on just how to make objects sit in space and just some basic composition rules and guidelines. Just a lot of stuff I haven't heard in years, so it's was definitely a nice tutorial to check out. I think that's another good, I don't know if it's a good way of thinking, I guess. Like never feel like you know everything. Like always keep an open mind and always try to learn new stuff. And I think the moment you feel like you're successful or you feel like you don't need to learn anything is probably not a good thing. Always keep an open mind and learn new stuff and be curious about the world, and just always try to grow and get better and all that stuff. So just adding in some secondary lights. I was mentioning earlier, I kind of smoked the set behind this robot, but I think adding some secondary lights also help add a bit more life to the scene. Kind of selecting out some things with the lasso tool and just making it feel like there's, again, this kind of mist or smoke behind the mech, and I'm just kind of it's kind of gradually, there's a gradient of light coming off from the area where maybe some pieces of tech or something are blocking the way. Just all classic cinematography stuff, like watch any Ridley Scott movie or old James Cameron movie, or just really classic cinematography. So it's using some kind of like tech hanger brush to get some more abstract details on the left. Again, I'm just trying to give the impression of this foggy, smoky set with some sort of silhouetted forms in the foreground. Just adding a bit more smoke and lighting. Making sure the chords still read. Just getting some more reference pieces of just tech and junk and make it feel like a very lived-in, worn environment, or quote-unquote gritty and real, as the buzzword goes. Which basically just means taking real life and making that your setting, making it look like it's lived in and real and looks like someone has actually used it, as opposed to the cleaner something is, the more it looks like a prop or it looks fake, or and I think as an audience we just don't buy that it's real. Like the more lived in it looks, the more, you know, you have this old gun or something, or this old hangar, and there's just junk and dirt and crap everywhere, and I think as an audience we buy that more as being a real place than some set that's built and it looks like someone painted on those details, or it just, again, just looks too clean, and as an audience we instantly just don't believe it. Just going in there for some more secondary details. I was trying to find, the main reason for looking at those references was trying to find some sort of detailed cross-beam form, and I just couldn't be bothered looking much further, so I just painted it in myself. And at this point the layers are quite extensive. I'm just trying to get that purple light a bit higher. It was going behind a layer of the structural details on the mech, so it just was looking a bit off. Right now just painting in some specular highlights and where that light source would be, illuminating objects to make it all feel like it's sitting in the same environment. Just detailing the guy's mask a bit more, kind of bouncing around, just generally detailing and making sure everything's getting finished to a varying degree. I thought it'd be really cool for that chest area, if there was you kind of see this on tanks sometimes in the front of their, the front of the tank, just these like 4 different optics looking in all directions. I thought that'd be kind of cool if under the chest there was a bit of that, as opposed to some sort of Apache optics, which I've kind of seen too many times. Smoking the set a bit more. I think it gets a bit overkill here, but I think I tone it down a bit later, but just really playing up that gradient of light and gradient of value to sell the depth in this space. Yeah, so making that color less distracting kind of just felt a bit off. Yeah, just toning things down a bit more just was getting a bit too smoky. Then I was thinking of maybe it would be cool if there's some sort of draped plastic in there, and I tried to make it work, but I couldn't find a space that really felt natural. It just felt too tacked on. At least that's what I thought. But multiple materials, always playing up different materials is always a good thing to add a lot of variety and life to a scene, just having all these different materials going on. I'm just playing around. Like maybe I felt having it draped on 2 points was it's covering up the structural details too much, and I was trying to like warp it around, and maybe it's just hung by 1 point, but it just didn't feel like it was fitting, so I just had to take it out. Again, just going in and scrubbing details and calculating where the light would be hitting and painting all that stuff in to make all these elements integrated a bit more. Because again, Keyshot just kind of gives us a very general ambient lighting, but doesn't really have doesn't really get in and specifically calculate things the way I would like sometimes. So again, just popping out those areas on the shoulder and really just refining and defining all these forms. Getting all that top lighting and specular highlights on those chords to make them pop out a bit more. Checking some reference for maybe some other structural details, or drawing silly faces on these soldiers. Right now I'm just trying to figure out, I'm not really sure what I want as far as like the details, like graphic design details on the mech yet, so I'm just trying to play around with that and figure that out. I think initially I go for something, just not sure about the graphic design right now, so just play around with that a bit and add some more life and details to everything, but just starts to feel a bit too noisy, so try to tone it down by the end. So little X marks or achievement marks for pilots and things you'll see all the time, like kills in a battle or something, or all that sort of stuff. Just adding more personality and character to the world, just making it feel a bit more lived in and back to that gritty and real. Just thinking about some like sort of hatch or latch mark or something along those lines in the belly, but I think I ultimately, again, just opt for simplicity. But again, it was worth exploring just to see what it looks like. Just using the line tool to draw on a lot of these forms. And you can also go into the layer style and do a bevel and emboss and make it indented for a bit more form. Just adding a bit more details on those chords. It felt like the chord model we got was just very simple, so I'm just, maybe some tape or some different manufacturing lines or stickers or just all that sort of stuff. Adding a bit more lighting of that purple light from the sort of PDA or whatever he's using, how that light would fall on all the forms directly below it and around it, just to help sell that light is actually in the space. Detailing that column a bit more, getting in there and painting a bunch of the details, adding in some more decals and things from my decal set, just detailing that shoulder piece a bit more, getting away from the literal one from the show. Getting those kind of copying around those sort of structural lines on the surface of the form, just to add a bit more life. Like you'll see that on tanks and things, just parts on a tank where they can clip on packs or attachments and things, or whatever is needed to for the job at hand, but just have these kind of indented clips, which also not only can be used as attachment points, but can be used to it also lightens the weight of the vehicle itself, which is so right now just adding in more pipes. Was feeling like that space was a bit too empty, and you can't go wrong with pipes. So just some hanging pipes, maybe it's getting refueled or repaired, and also draws your attention to the soldier in the foreground a bit more, and keeps your eye flowing around the painting. And just getting them to sit in the space a bit more, using some gradients and all that good stuff. Again, still feel like these chords keep getting out of the local value of those chords keep getting off, so it just feels a bit weird. So just going back in and darkening those a bit, playing around with different graphic breakups on that optics area, but I think just leaving it plain is best. I was thinking it'd be cool if there's some more prominent chest pieces, like where these like 4 planes intersect or 3 planes intersect. There's just like a some sort of attachment that's just a bit more refined structural point that helps strengthen that point. I'm just going in with the smudge brush here and there to smudge out some edges. I feel like the dust and scratches get a bit too noisy. I think it's better to, I mean, if it does get damaged, it's going to be a bit unpredictable anyway, but it feels a bit too evenly spaced all over. Like, doesn't feel like he got in some fight and there was a big gash on the side of him or some dent. Just feels like generally he was scuffed all over and doesn't feel believable. So just going in there and trying to logically add details where things would get scratched, like on the edge of, like the edges of these forms, there'd be much more wear and tear as opposed to just a flat panel. But just trying to logically go through and make all that stuff work. Just adding in some more part lines and things now. And just go in and refine everything to a greater degree. And so I have these kind of yellow indicator decals and things, but just making sure the local color and value is accurate based on how in shadow it is. I think we're getting pretty close to a final now, and just kind of going in, doing some smart sharpen, film grain, and lens correction to get the chromatic aberration on the image. So just getting pretty close. I think that's pretty close to final. I think I experiment with thinking maybe a lens flare could be all right. So just playing around with that and seeing if that will work. It's a bit cheesy, but it does help sometimes to make it feel a bit more cinematic. Again, just last minute post-production, post-processing little tricks. Just getting that to fit in the space and toning it down a bit. I'm never a fan of like really in your face lens flare, so just slightly in there, just enough to notice it. Just flipping the canvas to make sure the composition's working, and I think it's working pretty well. Few things I might want to change, but I think overall it's looking pretty close to what I want, and yeah, I think it's working pretty well. I think I took a little break and then went back in and just start toning some things down. These are some photos I took at the Singapore military show. Still wasn't happy with the decal setup on the chest, and I thought instead of numbers, some sort of decal or some sort of animal. So there's a cool sort of stag or something from this Apache, and just going to use that as maybe our key identifier of this robot as opposed to a number. And again, I probably get too much into these details. If this is just a concept painting, you probably wouldn't have to do that. If this got approved, then we'd have to isolate out this mech, and I'd have to detail every single little piece and refine everything much further. So before concept, I think it helps sell the idea. So hope you guys enjoyed this, and thanks for watching, and look for the next one. Thanks, guys.